So we're looking back now. So back on that day, there's a burglary that took place down in South Anchorage in the Ocean View neighborhood. And that there's two individuals that were spotted at that location by a security video in a neighboring house. There were two people that got out of the vehicle. They went to the residence, and there was an injury that occurred as trying to break into the residence. The burglary was cut short. The people that were there left the location, and the security video caught that this car that they were driving was a silver Monte Carlo. And it was distinct because it had a dent in the left bumper area. So after that, then the person we believe to be Salazar had an injury to his hand, and they went to the Providence Hospital and sought medical attention for that injury. While at that getting treated, there were other people at the hospital who knew these individuals, and there was sort of a kind of not a physical confrontation, but just sort of disrespectful interaction between the two parties.
At the hospital?
At the hospital.
Did he cut his hand on glass or something?
Probably glass, yeah. As I recall, it was something sharp. So that vehicle drives back over to the hospital. They get treated for the injury, and these two parties meet. And then after a while, later in that day, then the parties that were at the hospital when Salazar and Taha arrived, they happened to see them, and they're driving a white Escape. There's several people in that vehicle.
Okay, just backtrack. So Taha is with Salazar.
We believe he was.
You believe that they were the two that were involved in this attempted burglary, the two that were in the Monte Carlo.
We believe that, yes.
And you believe that Taha went with Salazar to the hospital so Salazar could get treated, and that's where they had some sort of confrontation with these two other people?
With other people, yes.
Okay. Was the confrontation in the parking lot or in the hospital?
No, I think it's in the hospital, because it's sort of, okay. And we both know that those could be, they can happen right here in front of us, so we not realize that there's a disturbance going on. You know what I mean? The way someone looks at each other, we don't always know. Yeah. So there's something occurs there, and then later after that time period, we spot the white Escape and the Monte Carlo driving in the Mountain View area.
I'm sorry, because I interrupted you, I already forgot. So the people that were involved in the altercation were driving a white Escape?
Correct.
And then everybody went their separate ways?
Correct.
Okay.
And then they pick up again in the Mountain View neighborhood, and we have surveillance footage that supports that from the holiday in Mountain View. And the white Escape ends up driving to the 400 block of Irwin Street and parks. The people who are in the white Escape get out of the vehicle, they're standing outside. The silver Monte Carlo then drives past that location once and then goes around the block, and then on the second time around, by this time Mr. Lawrence is walking to the north on Irwin Street, and he is going to a friend's house. It's his birthday. He's told his parent that he's going to go to his friend's house, and once he's up there, he happens to be caught in the crossfire from when this vehicle comes around a second time, and the bullets come from the silver Monte Carlo and strike the people who are standing out by the white Escape. And then there's an exchange of gunfire back in the other direction, and it's at that time that we then see the silver Monte Carlo head south on Irwin Street. It's captured on video. Seen going through a stop sign. It's heading towards the east, towards the mountains. So at this time, then Mr. Lawrence is struck in the head, and then the medical, the ambulance comes, transports him to the hospital, and the investigation starts in earnest at that point, where we have the crime scene team, and then we have several people that were brought here. After he leaves the location, the Monte Carlo leaves the neighborhood, and then goes to a residence in Muldoon, which we then capture another video footage of the people getting out of the Monte Carlo. we time the difference between one camera video down to where we see him at the next location, and it is Mr. Taha and Mr. Salazar.
Now, may I stop you for a moment again? So when you say that the white Monte Carlo went to a residence in Muldoon, do you see this immediately, or this is something that, you know, weeks
Oh, no.
later you went back and put it together?
Yes.
Or?
This takes weeks, yeah.
Yeah,
What
okay.
we're talking about in just a couple minutes is actually, you know, weeks.
Of investigative work, okay. I was just-
Yeah.
It's just because you have to go, there's legal processes that you gotta go through, and then when you
Yeah. It's not like you were following these guys to a residence in
Oh, no.
Muldoon. You had no idea at that point where they.
No.
Yeah, okay.
No.
Just
It's
wanted-
about Carl's Jr.
So I'm getting up into that. So then we see them at the residence in Muldoon, and we are putting together the kind of vehicle that we're looking for. We're putting out locates. Again, this dent on the back of the car is important. And then once the vehicle leaves the residence in Muldoon, a patrol officer car picks it up at Boniface and Tudor on the in-car video. At the time, we knew we were looking for this kind of a car, but that particular one, we weren't sure at the time if that was it, but the officer made note of it. So he didn't make a stop on it.
That same day, the officer encountered the Monte Carlo and said that looks
Right,
like
'cause it
a
was still a
suspicious vehicle, but didn't make a stop.
That's right. We weren't,
Okay.
it wasn't completely developed enough with what kind of car we needed. So later in that day, after the shooting, then the suspects in the Monte Carlo, Salazar and Taha, are seen by the homeowner of the burglary that happened early in the morning. The homeowner then feels like those guys look suspicious, and by the way, that one guy's got a big cut on his hand with a bandage on it, and that person then takes a picture of these two at the Carl's Jr.
Okay, now, so they are at a Carl's Jr. where?
I believe it's in Huffman.
Okay, oh, that one. Oh, and it just so happens that the person who had been burglarized this morning was at the Carl's Jr.?
Yep. And the burglary is in Ocean View, so not too far from Huffman.
Right, okay.
It's amazing how small town it is, huh?
Carl, all right, got that. So, I'm sorry, so that person who was the homeowner said, these guys look suspicious
And just took their photo.
and took their picture. Tell me that again, because that's so weird.
So they were at Carl's Jr. in Huffman. The homeowner from the burglary happened to be at the same Carl's Jr. and saw these characters and thought they looked suspicious and noticed that one of them was injured and realized that one of the people had injured themselves at their home, and so they took a picture of them. And then we connected that together too. These are all separate cases, not related. So that's the schedule, the details.
Okay.
Those are the broad strokes.
Right. So that all happened day of, basically, but then you lost track of them for months, right?
No, actually, so there is a lot of forensics that have to go on. So we have to look at video footage. It takes hours and hours and hours. So not only do we have to collect it, we have to obtain a warrant for it. We have to have somebody that can extract it off of the drive so that we can put it onto a different drive, and then we can sit down and review it. That kind of work is taking place, incrementally, depending on what the workload is. Sometimes it's done by officers who are on light duty from an injury or some sort, and so it takes a while for us to get through all those processes.
When we got to a point where we had enough information to put out the location.
Yeah, and that would have been in July. So we work on it through April, May, June, and then in July we put out the Taha thing. And there's investigative reasons why we didn't put information out right immediately, because we didn't know we had to go through all these different people that were present and try to basically say, okay, you were standing here, who is next to you, and get all these corroborated stories, because none of us were there. So we needed to be able to say, okay, who is standing where and what took place. Legally, since we're a stand your ground state, this is one of these issues that it's like, okay, so someone's shooting at you, are you able to shoot back? And is that self-defense? And are you responsible if someone is struck and killed in that process? That has nothing to do with this. And so there's some legal challenges that we needed to review and determine whether or not we actually could charge somebody.